In this video, we're talking about 3 things I learned about songwriting from Nirvana. And be sure to stick around for the end, where I'm actually going to talk about one thing I learned about arranging from Nirvana as well. The first thing I learned from Nirvana is to put hooks and riffs everywhere. Almost every Nirvana song seems to have riffs and hooks that are memorable throughout the song. They don't just let the interesting part of the song be the vocal the way some songs do, but almost always seem to take advantage of some of the other instruments that can be interesting if we just take the time to develop them into an interesting riff or an interesting hook. Whether it's the simple but effective bass and guitar riff from the song Scoff, or Swap Meet, or Mr. Mustache. Or maybe the best example of this is Smells Like Teen Spirit, which is absolutely littered with hooks. Seemingly every guitar part is a type of hook. Even the chord progression in the intro and in the chorus is actually a form of hook. It's something that is very memorable and would stand out to the listener. It's not just your basic chord progression where you do one measure of one chord and one measure of another. No, it's actually in an interesting rhythm, but it is technically just a chord progression. And then even Kurt's vocals in the chorus of Smells Like Teen Spirit is very hook-like. Almost every short phrase of the chorus is like a hook. It's simple, memorable, and catchy. And the second thing I learned about songwriting from Nirvana is that bass is underrated. And not just generally is bass underrated, especially I think by your average songwriter, but I think even for Nirvana, the bass was incredibly underrated. If you think about Nirvana, probably you're thinking of Kurt Cobain's vocals, you're thinking of the grungy guitars, you're thinking of Dave Grohl's drums, but who ever thinks about bass when thinking about Nirvana? But there are actually several bass-driven songs where really it's the bass guitar that has the very memorable riff or hook, and the bass is honestly the driving force for the song. Take songs like Blue, or Love Buzz, The third thing I learned about songwriting from Nirvana is that cryptic lyrics create conversation. Now this could be taken as a good thing or a bad thing. I think it's a little of both. So whether we like it or not, it seems like cryptic lyrics tend to put people in 2 camps. They're gonna be the people that really like the artist and just assume that it's brilliant because they don't understand it. And then the other camp is the people who maybe don't like the band or are just kind of meh about the band, and they will assume that because it's hard to understand, it's just nonsensical garbage. So if you talk to seemingly any Nirvana fan, they will tell you things like, oh, their lyrics are so brilliant. And then if you ask, okay, what is it about? They usually look at you with a blank face, like, I don't know. So it's kind of weird to say something's brilliant, but also admit that you have no idea what it means. And then there are people maybe on the other side who say, look at all this. It's random poetry-ish stuff that doesn't even work together. It's kind of garbage. And frankly, I'm somewhere in the middle because I do actually really like Nirvana, but I do think Nirvana is one of those artists like the Beatles that gets a break just because they have a big name, where people just presume that they're brilliant and then assume that all of their songs are brilliant in every way because they just have already accepted the premise that they're a brilliant artist. So Beatles fans will tell you how the lyrics of Yellow Submarine or I Am the Walrus are actually brilliant, even though nope. And in the same way, Nirvana fans will probably defend lyrics like this. Sell the kids for food. Weather changes moods. Spring is here again. Reproductive glands. What does that mean? I don't know. But if you're a huge Nirvana fan, you probably would swear up and down. You might even leave a hate comment talking about how amazing and brilliant they are, and I'm just not smart enough to understand. And if you're not a Nirvana fan, then you probably are going to be like, yes, I always knew they were overrated. So I think this is just what happens when you have cryptic lyrics. The plus side, people who like you will just assume brilliance, even if it really isn't brilliant. And people who don't like you are just gonna double down on how much they don't like like you and use it as a reason, saying, look, their lyrics don't even make sense. It's just random stuff thrown together, and some people buy it. And as promised at the beginning, here is a bonus tip about what I learned about arranging from Nirvana. And that is that it sometimes might be better to just let loose and be raw. In today's day and age, with computers and the ability to record in high quality cheaply at home and do as many takes as you want, and also to over edit with tools like MIDI or to over pitch correct, it's really easy to lose sight of the value of something that just is kinda raw. And if there's one word for Nirvana, I would argue it probably is the word raw. Everything is just right there. It's in your face. It doesn't feel hyper edited. It honestly feels like a few dudes just stumbled into the studio and was like, all right, let's record it live. And then that was the album, and they put it out like that. In fact, if somebody told me, oh, did you know that Nirvana actually recorded that album just live in the studio? They took one day, went through each song and called it good. Outside of some obvious things, like obviously Kurt had to go back and then do the harmony vocals and things like that. But if you told me that the original track was largely just done live or in just 1, 2, or 3 takes, I honestly probably would believe that. So the good thing about all the tools we have today is we have so many tools to make great sounding music for cheap at home. The downside is that we can over obsess and actually get farther and farther from that raw sound. In fact, to many of us, just the idea of recording a guitar track and not editing it at all probably seems scary. And to be clear, I'm not saying that Nirvana's guitar tracks weren't edited, because I don't know, but it certainly sounds very raw and very in your face in a way that is very rare today in our hyper-produced music landscape. So maybe something we all can take away is to try to be more raw sometimes. Maybe sometimes we should put the editing tools away and try just doing a release, whether it's 1 song or maybe 5 songs, where we just sort of go for it and we don't obsess over editing every little detail, but we mostly just keep it very raw sounding. So 3 things I learned about songwriting from Nirvana are to put hooks everywhere, and that bass is just super underrated. It's a great songwriting tool, and bass can honestly be the star of a song, besides of course the vocal. And then also that cryptic lyrics create conversation, whether good or bad. And then finally, an arranging tip that we can take away from Nirvana is that maybe it's okay to go back to being really raw sometimes. So hopefully this is helpful to you. If it was, something else you'll likely find helpful is my free guide on 20 different ways to start writing a song. If you're new to songwriting, this will give you 20 different ways and options to start a song. And if you're a seasoned vet and you've ever struggled with writer's block, this should help you as well, because a lot of times I've found writer's block comes from just trying to write a song the same way over and over. We start with the guitar, we start with the guitar, we start with the guitar, and eventually we get kind of creatively burnt out. But if we just switch to another instrument or started with reverse engineering a song title or some other way to start a song, all of a sudden we realize, oh, I'm not creatively burnt out, I'm just burnt out with the guitar. So be sure to grab that, my free gift to you, link in the description down below. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you. I'll talk to you in the next one.